Managing information and avoiding plagiarism. Evaluating sources. Dear students, while we are managing information, we are coming across a lot of sources. And we as researchers should know that how would we be evaluating sources. Not every source is to be taken into account and to be included into your study, right? So we are to determine that how our particular sources would support our research, topic or research work, right? So what particular sources are going to serve our purpose? So we should know as researchers, because we have hundreds of, potential sources, hundreds and thousands of potential sources available around us, right? So we are required to evaluate sources before using them, before putting them into our research works, right? So assessing for quality sources is really important. How would we assess the quality of sources? So there are particular tips which should be known to you. While selecting sources which are worth your time and your attention, you must use those tips and you should decide that whether those sources are really important or not. One tip which is mostly done, carried out by researchers, is that they prepare annotated bibliography, right? So the annotated bibliography is a kind of bibliography when you comment on the quality of the source and you also provide your own reflection, right? So you're not only talking about the content of the bibliographic source, but you are also providing your own reflection. So that is called annotated bibliography and annotating bibliographic entries. So you would do that, and then that is based on the information for you to decide that how it is basically the information which is to be added and the sources which are to be included, right? As researchers, you should also know that what's the difference between popular sources and scholarly sources, because not every popular source is scholarly source, right? So popular sources are different than scholarly sources. So we would also discuss this point in this session. Remember that while deciding the quality of a source, you should have the following information. Number one, the title and brief description, right? So from the title and the brief description of the source, you would decide that how relevant it is, right? And then the date of the publication. So how current it is. And as researchers, you should know that you are to include the latest, sources in your area, in your research field, right? So the date of publication, and then the name of periodical, that how scholarly it is. Of course, when it is a periodical which is based on a very standard journal or a very high ranking university, so that is relevant, okay? So you would decide from the name of the periodical, and then the length of the source, right? How extensive it is to cover. So in coverage, how extensive it is, right? So that is also to be taken into account. And additionally, particularly when you are using URL addresses, you are using databases, then you should know the domain of the web pages, right? And the domain you give you those required informations which are very helpful in deciding whether your source is a quality source or not. Like for example, .com could be any kind of website. It could be a commercial one, right? Or the .edu is the domain which is for universities, for educational institutions, particularly those universities which are busy in researchers. Then .gov, which is a domain used for documents which are maintained by the countries at national level, like by the governments, right? Then .org is the domain which is used by organizations, independent organizations, right? So from the domain, you can also consider that what's the quality of the source. Now let's just discuss the difference between scholarly and popular sources. So the common features of a scholarly source are, number one, formal presentation, which includes abstracts and research methods. So any scholarly source would be based on, the abstract, written very technically, then the research methods involved for conducting the research study. Then it would also include review of previous research studies, like the literature survey, and then it would be reporting the original research, the primary research. Okay, so that is another token of scholarly research, and then it will definitely include references, right? So these are the common features of a scholarly source, and it often has multiple authors who are academics, right? So a scholarly work is most of the time written by more than one researcher, okay? So these are the tips which would show you that it's a scholarly source. Now, what are popular sources? Popular sources which may not be scholarly sources, which are not scholarly sources, their common features are that they are often based on a provocative title, right? So they often have the provocative titles. Then the author is typically a staff reporter, but the person may not be an expert, right? So the person might be just a reporter of a newspaper or of a magazine, okay? Then the bulk of the article presents anecdotes about the topic from the daily life of people. So the anecdotes are aided, right? But it's not the scientific way of research. So the anecdotes are aided, and then the popular source would present a summary of research, but not the original research. Okay, so that is based on something which is not scholarly in nature. And then no consistent citation of sources is there for a popular source. So you must consider that what's the difference between scholarly or popular sources, and how would you decide that the quality of the sources is really up to the level of your research area. Okay, so these are the points which would help you out in considering and approaching scholarly sources.